Welcome everyone! So Flatsoy dropped his video on relative density disequilibrium on Sunday titled RDD Shown True with Physics in response to my Flatsoids Fails Relative Density Disequilibrium video. But why, in my opinion, did he fail relative density disequilibrium in his video titled Relative Density Disequilibrium Proven? I'll get into that later in this video. First, what is relative density and what is disequilibrium? Relative density is a ratio of the densities of two materials. Density is a measurement that compares the amount of matter an object has to its volume. An object with much matter in a certain volume has high density. An object with little matter in the same amount of volume has a low density. Density is found by dividing the mass of an object by its volume. Disequilibrium is simply the loss or lack of equilibrium. Equilibrium being a state in which opposing forces or actions are balanced so that one is not stronger or greater than the other. In his Relative Density Disequilibrium Proven video, Flatsoid made reference to an experiment done in this video by TheActionLab. What was this experiment about? Let's let TheActionLab explain it.
This is liquid CO2 right before it reaches its supercritical point. The most fascinating part about watching a liquid turn supercritical for me is that before the supercritical point, there's obviously a liquid below with a gas above, separated by a line or a meniscus. But once it turns supercritical, that line just kind of fades away and it becomes one state, a supercritical fluid. But this gave me an idea and raised a question in my mind. If the line just kind of goes away, then what would happen if there was a boat floating on the surface of the liquid right when it turns supercritical? What happens to the boat? Does it just stay right where it was floating before? Or would it now float to the top since the whole tank is now filled? Or would it sink to the bottom because there's no layer of liquid to float on? Well, today I'm going to be testing this out by actually floating a small styrofoam boat in liquid CO2 and then heating it to its supercritical point. In order to do this, I have to contain a lot of pressure. The supercritical point of CO2 is at 73 atmospheres, which means I need to contain over 1,000 pounds per square inch in my vessel. So to do that, I'm going to be using this vessel here. It has two thick pieces of acrylic windows, and I can bolt these together over the body that has a valve and a pressure gauge right here. This tank has been tested to over twice the pressure that I'm going to get to today, but it still makes me a little nervous using it getting to this high of a pressure. So to start off, we need some CO2. When it's solid, we call this dry ice. So I'll just grab some chunks of dry ice and put it in the vessel. Now I'll tighten these bolts and then close the valve. As soon as the pressure increases, the dry ice stops turning from a solid directly into a gas. Oh, there it goes. But it can now turn into a liquid. So now we've got liquid CO2 in here. If I release the pressure, it freezes into solid CO2 again. Okay, so now let's do this for real. Let's put in our dry ice, and I'm going to add this half sphere of styrofoam to act as our boat floating in the liquid. Okay, now let's put our little boat in. Let's close it up. Okay, the styrofoam is very squished, but it is floating.
So far, it is a pretty straightforward experiment. Let's see what happens.
Okay, now I'm heating it up. See if we can get to supercritical pressure here. It'll be at around 1,000 psi. Okay, we're above 500 psi, or about halfway there. You can see there's still the meniscus there. It's not even cold anymore. We're getting close. Okay, right now we're at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. We're waiting to get to around 87 degrees Fahrenheit. Look how the fluid splashes. We're getting very close to the supercritical state. Okay, here it goes. I'm gonna wiggle it a little bit, see what it looks like. Whoa, what is happening? It's like dripping from the top. It's condensing and dripping down. Look at that. It's like a waterfall. That is so weird. That means it's supercritical on the right side, but then it's condensing back into a liquid on the left side, because the right side is where my heat is. So what's happening is the refractive index of the gas and the liquid are becoming the same, and so you don't see a meniscus, or you don't see the light bend when it goes through the liquid. So even when I shake it, you don't see a real difference between the refractive indices. But you can still see the styrofoam floating on top. Uh-oh. The styrofoam is dipping deeper down in it now. Whoa. It's like disappearing, look. The line's disappearing. That meniscus is just going away, but the styrofoam's staying pretty similar place to where it was. Okay, the line is literally going away. You can still see it disrupt the background though in this shot. So there's still slight meniscus there. But it's going away. Whoa, and it's kind of rising up above the surface of the styrofoam. Oh, the styrofoam sunk. It sunk down in the liquid. But now I can no longer see a meniscus on top. You can't really tell where the gas and the liquid separate from each other.
This was the point when Flatzoid declared the following and didn't bother to show the rest of the video.
This proves without a doubt, mass does not attract mass, therefore the mass does not give rise to a force, but it's an unbalanced force due to the object ratio of its density to the medium. That proves without a doubt relative density disequilibrium is the real deal and gravity is just a farce.
Okay, it's fully supercritical now. Over 1,000 psi now. And the styrofoam is at the bottom. You can still see that it's being heated from the side there. So you can see some little waves happening from the hot fluid rising. But it's all supercritical. There's no meniscus whatsoever. If I pick up the vessel and move it around, you can see that there isn't two states in here anymore. It's just one state that's a little viscous, and the styrofoam can just fall through it slowly. Okay, now let's let it cool down a bit, and it should revert from its supercritical state into a liquid with gas above it again. And I think the styrofoam should float once again. Okay, I'm going to put an ice cube on top. Oh, it disappears from view. Gone. Oh, there it is. I saw it start to float. And it's back on top. Look at that. As soon as it's out of the supercritical phase, then it floats back on top of the meniscus. That is so cool. It's totally back on top. Okay, now I'm going to release the pressure. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Whoa. The styrofoam got sucked out the little tiny hole there. It tried to leave. Here's our styrofoam boat. It survived. That's where it tried to get sucked out of that little hole at the end. So why did this boat sink when it went supercritical? Well, if you think about it, right before it turns supercritical, there's a liquid on bottom and a gas on top. Since the boat is floating right on the surface of the meniscus, that means the average density of the boat is more dense than the gas, but less dense than the liquid. But then once it becomes supercritical, these two states suddenly become one. So it would make sense that the density of the remaining fluid should be some average of these two states. And sure enough, if you look up the density of liquid CO2, it's around 800 grams per liter at room temperature. But then once it reaches its critical point, it suddenly drops to just above 400 grams per liter. This average density is less dense than the boat's average density, so it sinks to the bottom. This would also be the case with any real boat that had an open top as well. So there we go. Now we know that boats sink in supercritical fluids. So next time you're on a lake that suddenly turns supercritical, be sure to get to shore quickly.
In Flatzoid's Relative Density Disequilibrium Proven video, he showed what he thought was an example of unbalanced forces, but was it really?
Hey Dal, check here. Look, I'm going to quickly debunk you in 10 seconds. You know what that's called? Unbalanced force. No acceleration required. You're welcome.
To have unbalanced forces means that the force applied in one direction is greater than the force applied in the opposite direction. When unbalanced forces are acting on an object, there is a change in speed and/or direction. Flatzoid, did you really show an unbalanced force? No. Let's take a look at it again in slow motion. Here we see Flatzoid positioning the object on the palm of his hand and putting his finger on top of it to hold it. Though the object is being held on the top, it isn't vertical, it is leaning to his right. Because the object is already leaning to the right while sitting on his bumpy palm, it falls to the right. Oops, so not unbalanced forces at work here. Due to the heat, the two fluids in the cylinder are now one fluid called a supercritical fluid. The fluid inside is at equilibrium, but the boat still goes in a downward vector. This actually shows mass attracting mass, not relative density disequilibrium. I used DuckDuckGo and Google to search for the phrase relative density disequilibrium and found YouTube videos about it, results on relative density and density, but nothing on the phrase itself or its meaning. So this leads me to the conclusion that relative density disequilibrium is simply a made-up phrase some anti-globers use to explain away the downward force we call gravity. Not only did Flatzoid admit to its relative density disequilibrium not gravity fallacy in his relative density disequilibrium proven video, he also did it in this clip from his live stream on May 28th, 2024.
So yeah, I'm going to be working on that RDD second video this weekend, just for Global Mom, because she seems to not understand that when a person shows the density of the medium changing, and it caused the object to accelerate, the manipulated independent variable was the density. This is one thing I don't get about these people with the gravity, though. When they claim what is gravity? Oh, we don't actually know, but gravity causes it. Then you're like, okay, let's do an experiment then, which you need to know the cause then, because they're claiming gravity is the cause. But then you say, but that's not what gravity is. It's like, no, but gravity causes that. But you don't know what gravity is. How can you claim that's gravity? So that's why it's like gravity causes gravity, because they claim the acceleration is gravity, and they claimed what caused the acceleration is gravity. How?
You know why, Flatzoid, and it's not RDD. You just don't like gravity, so you bring up the relative density disequilibrium excuse. Others bring up electromagnetism, and yet others bring up that the Earth is accelerating upward. So even flat earthers can't come together on what causes things to go down. It's just all, the globe Earth doesn't make any sense, so therefore it's impossible. Science is a religion. Our senses can't be fooled. It looks flat, therefore it's flat. And other flat earth talking points that are due to misunderstanding and indoctrination through belief. I will concede, though, that the TheActionLab's experiment was about different densities and the change in those densities and what caused the changes. However, it doesn't prove relative density disequilibrium because that does not exist, and it does not disprove gravity. It does prove that flat earthers will use anything they can to support their anti-globe narrative. There's this term called ignorance is bliss. That term comes from On a Distant Prospect of Eton College. The last part of that poem by 18th century English poet Thomas Gray reads, "To each his suffering all are men, condemned alike to groan, the tender for another's pain, the unfeeling for his own. Yet, why should they know their fate, since sorrow never comes too late, and happiness too swiftly flies? Thought would destroy their paradise. No more where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise." Don't forget to do all the YouTubey things. Thank you for watching. You are all awesome. See you in the next video.